In this week's video, I will show you an insane trick that I learned from watching an MDI pro. I am Sixy, I do Mythic Plus carries, and these videos are designed to teach you gamers basic, intermediate, and advanced strategies to help you not only time your keys, but to scale those strategies into even higher level keys. If you find this video or any of my other videos helpful, please drop it a like and leave a comment. Let's dive in. This week, we will be heading to Mists of Tirna Scithe. It is one of the most beloved dungeons in Shadowlands, but as timers and mechanics have been adjusted for the other dungeons, Mists has quickly become one of the toughest keys to time. This is due to bosses with large intermission phases, hard-hitting trash mechanics, and gated pulls in the middle section of the dungeon. The gated section of the dungeon is generally referred to as the maze and will be our main focus of discussion. Before we get into the more advanced stuff, let's lay down a solid foundation and discuss the various abilities that can be found in this portion of the dungeon. The main one that most people are aware of is the Mistveil Tender's Nourish the Forest. This ability, if allowed to cast, will place a magic healing buff on all enemy mobs in combat. This ability heals for a lot, so it needs to be kicked. However, if the ability is casted, it can also be dispelled by offensive dispels such as Trank Shot or Consume Magic, etc. If there's a focused target in the group, such as an inspiring mob, that mob should be dispelled so it can be finished off. Another ability that can be kicked and offensively dispelled is Mistveil Shaper's Bramblethorn Coat. This ability applies a shield to a low health enemy mob. The shield absorbs a set amount of damage and, if damaged through, will break and apply a root to all players in combat. This ability should be kicked, and if not, it can be offensively dispelled. This ability by itself is not inherently dangerous, but in combination with Bucking Rampage or Spear Flurry can be very dangerous. Spear Flurry is a frontal cone AoE casted by the Mistveil Defender that deals damage to anyone standing in it, and it can be easily sidestepped. It is, however, slightly more dangerous after a nearby enemy mob dies, as this will enrage the defender, increasing its damage done by 50% for every mob killed within range. This enrage can be soothed. Bucking Rampage is a far more dangerous AoE ability casted by the Mistveil Guardian. If allowed to complete its cast, anyone standing within the circle will be dealt a massive amount of physical damage and be knocked back. At a certain key level, this can one-shot melee DPS. This ability can be interrupted with stuns or CCs at any point during the wind-up channel or cast channel, but it's much safer for everyone if it's interrupted during its wind-up phase. Mistveil Stinger casts an ability called Anima Injection. It charges to a random player and places a magic debuff on them. This debuff can and should be dispelled because if it is not, it deals a massive amount of magic damage to the player and anyone inside of the circle. Now I really want to hone in on a specific ability casted by the Mistveil Stalker called Mistveil Bite. Even in my plus 20 keys, I often see this ability overlooked, and because of this, it is usually the single most deadly ability in the keys I have done. After a few second windup, the Stalker will teleport to a random player, deal massive physical damage, and place a bleed effect on the player. This bleed is brutal. And as the key levels get higher, it will likely kill a player if they don't use both a defensive ability and get focus healed. This ability can easily be stunned or CC'd to stop its cast, or separately players can immune the bleed effect with Racials, Blessing of Protection, or immunities. Paraphrasing a tank I saw this week in a plus 25 miss, this mob is the limiting factor in double pulling certain groups. Most single packs in the maze have a good balance of things that need to be kicked and things that need to be stunned or CC'd. However, in a few spots within the maze, there's either a single mob pull or CDs align well enough that a double pull is feasible without wiping the group. A strong double pull in the maze section of the dungeon can greatly increase the efficiency of the maze and lower a group's overall time in the dungeon. First, in order to pull off a double pull, you need specific classes or abilities. Most of the classes able to do this are classes that have a pet that has a pet bar. Classes like Warlock, Hunter, Elemental Shaman, Unholy Death Knight all have a pretty easy time pulling this off. All you have to do is zoom your camera out, position your camera so that you can target a mob in the next section, then send your pet to attack the mobs. Once close enough, the mobs will aggro the pet and get into combat. Now, you can either recall your pet to you or let it die, and the mobs will then run through the wall to your group. Now, there are a few more classes that are capable of pulling mobs through the wall, but require a little more finesse to pull off. Druids can cast an ability called Force of Nature, also known as Treants, to pull through the walls. To do this, again, target a mob in the next room and cast Treants next to the door. The Treants will run through the door to attack the mob you have targeted. Once the Treants despawn, the trash will come through the wall to your group. Disc Priests also have an option to do double pulls throughout the maze, but it requires a lot more setup and requires the talent Dominant Mind. To set this up, you will need to CC a mob from before the first boss and keep it available to you all the way through the first boss, which in and of itself is a little tricky. After killing the first boss, you can mind control this mob at any point during the maze area and use it just like a hunter or warlock pet. However, Dominant Mind makes mind control a 2-minute cooldown, and the mind control only lasts for 30 seconds, and it's also broken by damage done to the mob, which can make it tricky to keep alive for more than one pull, so this trick probably has limited uses. Monks and Blood and Frost Death Knights used to be able to do something similar to the Treants pull, but it appears with recent patch updates, these tricks are no longer possible. These specs have pets, but they don't have pet bars, so getting them to go through the wall seems like it's impossible now. If you know of a way to get these pets through the wall, drop a comment below and let me know. So let's check out a few of the spots where we can pull off some of the double pulls. This very first pull of the maze section is a great place to double pull, as the first pack only has 2 Mistveil defenders, and the group to the right only needs 1 kick for Bramblethorn Crow and a few stuns for the Mistveil Guardians. After that, anywhere in the maze section is fine for pulling mobs using the pet technique. As long as your group is comfortable with the mechanics that need to be dealt with, you could theoretically double pull almost every portion of the maze. Now at higher key levels, dealing with all of the mechanics of a double pull is just not feasible, so you may want to reserve this strategy for when you get specific single mob pulls throughout the maze. Usually, at some point during the maze, you will have a single mob pull that contains either a Mistveil Night Blossom, Mistveil Gorgullet, or the Mistveil Matriarch. These mobs have a ton of health, but their mechanics are very manageable, making it pretty easy to add another group of mobs on top of it. Now there are 2 spots where any 40-yard ranged ability can also pull a second pack. If your maze route brings you to the section with the Mistveil Gorgullet on the upper level, you can pull the Mistveil Gorgullet from the lower level with a 40-yard ranged ability. The second is a simple wall pull. I saw this for the first time in a YouTube video of a higher level miss, but was lucky enough to catch this in a run on my Bear Druid. It's a very specific spot in the dungeon and it doesn't come up very often, but if you find yourself in this room on the map, you can actually moonfire through this wall to grab the pack in the room just to the north. I assume any ranged ability with enough range could pull this extra pack through the wall. The last and final pull requires a ranged ability, but almost every class has an ability with enough range. This is found in a room right near Mistcaller, the second boss. For the most part, I pull this pack separately for extra count, but it also can be brought into the boss for extra efficiency. Now, on Inspiring Weeks, this Mistveil Stinger is inspired. Normally, pulling this mob onto the boss would create a problem. The tank would not be able to kick Patty Cake, a deadly mechanic that can one-shot them if it's not interrupted. However, there was a super cool trick I saw during a stream from the World of Warcraft MDI champion, Yumi TV. The group CC'd this inspiring mob, leaving it untouched till after they defeated the boss. The cool thing about this trick was that even though the mob was in combat, as soon as they defeated the boss, the mob actually despawned. This is because all the remaining trash in the maze despawns after defeating Mistcaller. This clever use of game mechanics allows them to pull trash onto the boss, which is super efficient, without having to do a super inefficient single mob pull.